Hey guys, I was on the CDC website a couple of days ago and noticed that they downgraded the designation of the coronavirus from a pandemic to an outbreak. So this is a big deal. There's a big difference between a pandemic and an outbreak. Written word on documents and websites mean everything when it comes to government and law. So the changing of that designation is huge. One, a pandemic could possibly warrant a lockdowns or restrictions, possibly, right? But the other absolutely does not. An outbreak absolutely does not. My name is Morentin. I'm the host of the Health Freedom Show. Thank you for joining me for episode 1 of the Health Freedom Show. I planned on episode 1 being an introductory show discussing what the show is about, what to expect, a little bit about me, etc. But this development is so important, it's so huge, that I'm pushing that introductory show to episode 2. Okay, so on that note, be sure to subscribe to our channel and our email list to stay up to date with new videos and events. And the link is in the video description somewhere on this page, okay? So in this video, I'm gonna show you the CDC website and the outbreak designation because it has changed. Then I'm gonna go over to the World Health Organization website and show you their designation because it's different. And then I'm going to show you the official definitions of pandemics and outbreaks, and we'll actually go over like the whole category of what it is, which is endemics, outbreaks, epidemics, and pandemics, okay? And then I'm going to discuss some stats and show supporting documentation to actually support the findings that I'll show you. And then I'll share my thoughts on why this is happening and why I believe this could be the opportunity we've been waiting for to take back our freedom. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you and I'll be back in just a minute. Okay guys, next I'm going to go through some websites confirming the reclassification of the coronavirus. Then I'll go through some slides explaining why they downgraded the classification and why it matters, okay? So you can see right here, I'm on the CDC website, cdc.gov, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And down here, where it says Coronavirus Disease 2019, CDC is responding to the novel coronavirus outbreak. Okay, this right here used to say pandemic. Now it says outbreak. Okay, so let's go over here to the WHO website real quick. And you can see that it says it's classified as a pandemic. I'll refresh the page. And you can see, it is a pandemic that it's classified at. So it does matter. There's 4 different classifications in these types of matters. There's an endemic, an outbreak, an epidemic, and a pandemic. So the CDC has downgraded the coronavirus from a pandemic to an outbreak, so 2 levels down, and that's really super important. For they did that in the United States, and that's important, and we'll go over why in a little bit. Okay. So over here, this is the coronavirus section on the CDC. And if you go through this initial page, you'll notice that there's no mention of pandemic anywhere. I searched everywhere. And then I actually went to the FAQ section and didn't find anything about pandemics there either. But right here, you could see preparing for an outbreak. So they definitely, right here, preparing for an outbreak. How can I prepare for an outbreak? So they're definitely reclassified it as an outbreak. Okay. So now let's go over and we'll see what an outbreak actually is compared to a pandemic. So we're on webmd.com and it's talking about the differences between outbreak, epidemic, pandemic, right? So there's an endemic, then there's an outbreak, epidemic, and pandemic, okay? So endemic is sort of like the flu or a cold that comes around every year, but it's expected. Outbreak is slightly above that, and then epidemic is more than that, pandemic is more than that, and so on, okay? So an outbreak is when an illness happens in unexpected high numbers. It may stay in one area or extend more widely. An outbreak can last days or years. Sometimes experts consider a single case of a contagious disease to be an outbreak. So it's pretty, wide gamut there. But just one case of a contagious disease can be considered an outbreak. Sort of important there, right? So an epidemic, slightly more than that, so is when an infectious disease spreads quickly to more people than experts would expect. It usually affects a larger area than an outbreak, okay? And then a pandemic, that's what it was previously before it was an outbreak with the CDC, and what is still now with the WHO, right? A pandemic is a disease outbreak that spreads across countries or continents. It affects more people and takes more lives than an epidemic. Okay, so it spreads across continents and it takes more lives than an epidemic. So it's worse than an epidemic, and it's definitely worse than an outbreak. Now remember, like an endemic spreads across continents as well. That's the flu or the cold, etc. There's flu seasons and cold seasons. So an outbreak is much more mild than a pandemic according to their standards. And that classification, like I said, is important. Before we go into those slides, though, I want to discuss why they did it and why it's important. I want to go into a couple of things to show you what's going on and to give you some ammunition first. So about a week ago or so, the Centers for Disease Control came out with a report saying 94, as this says 96, but it was actually 94% of those dying from COVID-19 also had 2 to 3 underlying comorbidities. Okay, so they had 2 to 3 at least underlying comorbidities, and they were also average age of 80 plus years old when the average life expectancy in the US is 78, okay? So that's a big deal. So comorbidities, in case you don't know, is, that those are underlying conditions that they were going to die from anyways. Like, it could be like getting shot with a gun or getting killed in a car accident, right? So if you had the sniffles and you got shot in the head with a gun and killed, COVID, right? And that's facts in in death certificates right now, right? And then there's other things like cancer and heart disease and things like that, right? So as a person is dying of cancer and dying of heart disease, if they get a cold, if they get the flu or the coronavirus, any of those things, that's the straw that breaks the camel's back and it's going to send them over the edge. That's just the way it is, right? So that's expected. So having comorbidities, with the coronavirus deaths doesn't really matter. The ones that matter are the ones that were just from the coronavirus. Remember, it has to be vicious enough to kill people, right? In order to be a pandemic. And it's not. So only 6% died just from COVID-19. So that's a huge disparity between what's actually reported and what's actually happening, okay? And you could see here that, knowing these things, knowing what's going on, there's false positives that we'll talk about, and then the false number of actual deaths, with no underlying comorbidities. Things are still going crazy, and it's going crazier and crazier. So check this out. This is Operation Moonshot. This is from September 9th. Today is September 14th. Operation Moonshot, 100 billion pound plan could see entire UK population tested for coronavirus in just a week. All right, the entire population. So 10 million daily COVID tests will be dished out to get Brits back to the footy, to soccer stadiums, theater, and their mate's house, their friend's house, under new government plans costing 100 billion pounds. Okay, so their total healthcare costs for the year is usually 130 billion pounds. So it's almost the entire cost added onto that. It's crazy the amount of money people that they're spending for this stuff, right? Boris Johnson vowed to roll out new tests which can deliver results in 15 minutes. So the current tests right now aren't accurate. Like, how are these going to be accurate, right? He said a negative result would give Brits a freedom pass, allowing people to mingle like they did before COVID. Like a freedom pass allowing you to do what you were able to do like 6 months ago on basically your entire life, right? Now you need a pass for it. So let's see what that pass is. Millions of tests made available, giving results in 15 minutes. The person who tests negative is declared COVID-free and cleared to visit theaters and stadiums. They can also work, etc. They don't say what happens to the people that test positive, but if you test negative, then you're good to go, right? And in case you're wondering, it's a 24-hour pass, right? Under the plan, Brits would swab themselves, so it's a self test, in the morning and be given a 24-hour pass to mingle without having to stick to social distancing rules. A person could prove they had tested negative by either electronically presenting the results or showing a printed card. Like if you don't have a phone, then you have to show a card, and that allows you to roam freely for the day. And then every day you have to do that. I mean, how crazy is that, right? So the things are like they're seemingly getting worse when the virus, everything is getting better, right? So it doesn't make any sense, right? And you look at the US, where we actually, reclassified and downgraded, the CDC did, right? Fauci says normal life may not be back until the end of 2021, right? I mean, what? How do they know that? And like, why are they saying that when he himself knows that he has downgraded it? He's even saying it right now. He's even calling it an outbreak now, right? So why are they doing that? So let's go into some, this little slide presentation I made. I just made this really quick. So just to go over like why they're doing it and why it matters. Okay. So why is the change in classification important? So the change in classification, it's important because there's no reason to continue the lockdown for an outbreak. Okay. In this instance, continued lockdowns are unnecessary and illegal. They violate our constitutional rights. Health officials should be telling us that the virus was not as lethal or harmful as they estimated and we can resume life as usual. But no, it's getting worse, not better. So why does the lockdown continue? Why don't the officials open the country? And the answer is because COVID was just a tool to make the lockdown happen. Remember, the initial narrative was just 2 weeks, right? So that was just a tool to make it happen. They're going forward no matter what. It doesn't matter what the results, what reality is. They're going forward with their plan, with the COVID pass, the freedom pass, all that stuff, no matter what. It's craziness. So they keep changing the narrative. They change from the narrative from 2 weeks to no end in sight, and from flatten the death curve to eliminate the virus off the face of the planet, right? An impossible goal that nobody agreed to, and it's unattainable. It's not possible to do, right? It's crazy. So that's what they always do. The global elites, they always change the narrative like halfway through and make it something unattainable. All right, so they lured us in for the common good. And the truth is they don't ever plan on letting up. They plan on more and more top-down restrictions. Okay, so why downgrade the status? If this is so, if they want to continue and advance top-down restrictions and push the global agenda, why would the CDC change the COVID-19 classification to a downgraded status? Like, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just keep it the same, right, as a pandemic? And the answer is to cover their ass, okay? So the megalomaniac health officials and politicians, especially like those governors, etc., from city to state to federal, have abused their power and made decisions and mandates that killed people, have literally killed people. And all that corruption is coming to light. And they will be held accountable. The officials, the health officials, the politicians will be held accountable, okay? So the health officials, they are expendable. They are carrying out the globalist plans, and as the plans are exposed and the officials get in trouble, okay? But the globalists, they don't get in trouble. They profit, they gain power, and they remain untouched. At least that's how it's been in the past, right? But we can change that. So the officials, they are backpedaling. The various government and health officials, they realize that they are not untouchable and will be hung out to dry. So they're trying to cover their ass as their illegal and immoral actions get exposed. So the lies are getting exposed daily, everywhere. The internet and smartphones give us instant access to happenings and events all over the world. Social channels allow us to spread information to the masses, and mainstream media's lies get exposed in an instant. They're trying to cover up things and take posts down and all that stuff, but it's not working. It's actually fueling the fire. Things are backfiring for them. It's really awesome. There are over 100,000 lawsuits that have been filed across the U.S. against health officials and politicians from local to state to federal. It's awesome. So federal investigations are underway. They're underway right now. Many officials and agencies are under investigation, including Newsom and Cuomo, the governors of California and New York. In May, Governor Cuomo was asked by a federal committee to submit documentation regarding his fiasco with the nursing homes, where he sent all those COVID positive people and killed so many people in those nursing homes. He refused, saying he didn't have to, because he's the governor, right? So they said, yes, you do, and we demand reply by mid-June or further action will be taken. And it's in motion now, right? I believe it was the DOJ and some other health or medical entity in the federal government. And I actually saw the papers, the documents, the online PDFs or whatever, and it's pretty cool what's going on. So he's going down and he's stressing hard. And same thing with Newsom. He's under investigation for a number of things, and including his dealings with China, a few different dealings with China, including the $1 billion mask fiasco, right? So it's just craziness. And he also, by the way, put people, that COVID positive inside the nursing homes, etc. So he's going down too, right? So here's some little snippets out from actual news that's going on, just to prove what's the horrific things that are happening, right? The coronavirus testing at Boston Lab suspended after nearly 400 false positives. So false positives are being reported everywhere. There was, in Florida, there was half a dozen clinics that they all turned in their reports, and there was 100% positives, not even one negative, right? And we'll show you how that could happen in a second, okay? But first, we'll talk about the antibody test. Those other ones were PCR tests, but we'll talk about the antibody test real quick. So it's inaccurate at best, and it's because it detects antibodies that could be from a general cold that you've had at any time in your life and not from recent COVID infection, okay? So it's a worthless test. So the one that's used more often is the PCR test. And that one has false positives up to 90% of the time. And you're saying, how can it be 90% of the time? We just said that earlier that half a dozen or so just in Florida clinics had 100% positives in all of the clinics, right? Not just one clinic, but all the clinics, not one negative. And this is how, because you could create a positive test through amplification of genetic material in the PCR tests. Because it's not even actually a test. Every living thing, including plants, have genetic material. So you may have heard of that African, the leader of a country. I forget what the country was, but he's an actual MD, a medical doctor. And he was like, hey, let's see how accurate these tests are. So he sent out a swab from a fruit and from a goat. And they both came back positive. And this is why, because plants, they have genetic material. Goats have genetic material, okay? All living things do. The PCR test can be turned up or down to get a positive or negative test. PCR tests do not detect viruses. Like we said, they're not even a test. It's a tool used to amplify genetic material to make it easier to study. The creator of PCR tests stated that it cannot detect a virus. It wasn't intended to do that. And in fact, it's not even a test at all. It's intended to amplify genetic material so it can make it easier to be studied. And if you look over here in this, your coronavirus test is positive, maybe it shouldn't be. And then it goes down into where it talks about the cycles. And Dr. Mina Harvard, epidemiologist, says 30 cycles or less are sufficient, but most tests perform 40 to 45 cycles, increasing particle numbers by 100 to 1,000 times. So it's just genetic material that it's amplifying, so it's making the tests positive. And right down here, this Juliet Morrison, virologist at University of California, I'm shocked that people would think that 40 could represent a positive. So it's a false positive. So with overly sensitive PCR tests resulting in 10 times more case numbers and consequently COVID-19 marked deaths, are the U.S. numbers actually closer to 630,220 cases and 19,000 deaths? That is fewer than 1/3 of the 61,000 flu deaths of 2018, right? And we know now that it's even lower than that, right? Because of this. So new CDC reports shows 94% of COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. had underlying medical conditions. So they had 2 or more severe and life-threatening comorbidities, and they were also of a very advanced age. Like we said, they were 80 plus, and the average life expectancy in the U.S. is 78. So so look at that. All right, so the CDC states that 94% of COVID deaths had 2+ comorbidities, and 80 or 90% of those were over 80 years old. Average life expectancy in America is 78 years old. So that's 9,684 deaths, and remember that most of those are false positives. Many people that died and were labeled as COVID deaths on death certificates were not even tested, right? They just, that guy had sniffles, COVID, right? That's how they're doing it. So they merely had one of the dozen systems, and they're marked COVID. All right, so that's very interesting. That there's the numbers, right there, from 160,000 people that they claimed to have died to actually 9,684 that actually did, and that's why they lowered it from a pandemic to an outbreak. Right? And like we said, to cover their ass, because they're doing so much and they killed so many people and did so many bad, illegal, illicit things. These health officials and these, politicians, and they are gonna pay. This is America. They're gonna pay for their stuff. So the doctors worldwide, many doctors worldwide, have claimed the Rona is a hoax. The doctors who initially spoke out were shamed. They lost their jobs, and now they are heroes, right? They are heroes. Health officials are resigning all over. Other health officials, like in the NIH, the CDC, they've resigned, and also health officials at all levels of government, including Orange County, where I live, Los Angeles County, state of California, New York City, all over the country. It's awesome. They don't want to be associated with the corruption and go to jail. So these are guys that may have done a little bit bad, but they're good guys, whatever, and they're seeing what's going on. They're like, shit, I can't be a part of this. Everybody's going to go down. I don't want to go down too. I'm just going to quit my job. Nobody's going to quit a high-paying job right now, when everything is closed down, right? There's no chance of getting another job, really, right? So these guys are bailing because they don't want, to go to jail. They're trying to save their ass if they can, right? So Fauci, he lied for profit too. Fauci and the World Health Organization have lied about masks. They lied about the need for a lockdown. They lied about hydroxychloroquine so they can profit from vaccines and patents, okay? And people died unnecessarily in the process. Literal crimes against humanity. And if you think Fauci is like a saint, I'm like, oh my God, I don't believe you're saying that, whatever. I've been following him, I've been in this for 34 years, so I've been following him since the 80s, and here's a picture from back there. Dr. Fauci, you are killing us, right? This is from the AIDS debacle. Fauci did the same thing in the 80s and 90s, refusing alternative HIV treatments that were proven to work, just like the hydroxychloroquine, whatever protocol that they have with the zinc and everything else. There was other treatments for HIV that were proven to work with no side effects, and he just kept pushing those AZT cocktails, and people were dying from that, right? I mean, I lived that. I lived in West Hollywood during this time, right? I saw it. I mean, 40 years later, he's still fighting AIDS. No success. Zero success. And he's still trying to kill people for profit. Only this time, he and his cronies are exposed for what they are, right? And it is friggin' awesome. So Fauci, he fast-tracked Moderna. Moderna is, a big pharma company, that's fast-tracked for the vaccine for the coronavirus. He got them $470 million in funding, even though they were struggling financially. Some say they were in as much as $1.5 billion in debt prior to coronavirus. And also, they have never successfully brought a vaccine to market. So why are we giving them, this is $470 million government dollars in funding, from the NIAID. Why would they do that? Why would they give this company $470 million? They also licensed NIAID, National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases patents to Moderna. So yes, NIAID has patents for coronavirus that are needed for every vaccine, and they license them out to everybody that's trying to do a vaccine. They're licensing that out to, and everybody that's on that patent that works in the NIAID can get money from every one of those, up to it's either $100,000 or $150,000 a year per license, to each pharmaceutical company. It's crazy. It's all money. So Moderna applied for a COVID-19 vaccine patent in March of 2019 for its own patent, right? In March of 2019, way before the coronavirus supposedly, surfaced, right? And they made an amendment to the filing specifically outlining the situation we are in today in May of 2019, in May of 2019, they applied for that filing, for the situation we're in today, for a pandemic. Because before it was a COVID-19 patent that they applied for, but it didn't include pandemics or whatever and blah, blah, blah. And then they made an amendment in May. And how did they know to do this, right? Insider information. So, you would think like, hey, they got all this stuff going on, they're trying to roll this thing out to like 7 billion plus people, right? So people that, these big pharma companies stand to make not just billions, but trillions of dollars off the vaccines, if they're able to bring them to market. But with Moderna, even though they're the poster child for the NIAID and the CDC to make the vaccine, look at this. Moderna executives sell their stock in Moderna. So the Moderna executives are selling their stock in Moderna. So I think this is also like what's happening with the health officials and the politicians. They're seeing that some bad shit's going on, and they're trying to bail out and cover their ass. So the Moderna executives know that stuff's going to fall. They're selling their stocks to cover their ass, and they're probably even going to bail from the company, This says bad optics or something more. Moderna executives' stock sales raise concerns, and then over here, Moderna tumbles. The stock tumbles amid insider share sales and COVID vaccine jitters. I mean, it's just crazy. It's nuts. Like, there's no way the stock should fall. There's no way the executives should be selling their stock, right? I mean, if everything was on the up and up. So there's endless corruption, and it has unintended consequences. The corruption is being brought to light. Entities, institutions, and high-level individuals, they have lost their insider advantage and are backpedaling to try and save themselves. They're trying to quietly cover their asses, but heads are rolling. People are being indicted. People are being convicted right now. It's awesome. It's very, very cool. So this is an opportunity, the CDC quietly downgrading the classification of the coronavirus from a pandemic to an outbreak as an extremely important development for us, the people, because it's a ray of light shining in through months of darkness. So with more restrictions and more lockdowns for no apparent reason, things are seemingly getting worse in the world and not better. Remember that, the thing with the mission, whatever, and Fauci saying everything's going to be stuck till 2021, all that stuff. But now there's hope. Now there's hope. Now there's a solid reasons to stand up and fight back against the oppression and take our lives back. Today we are still under crazy restricted lockdowns for top-down control with seemingly no end in sight. However, the world population is waking up to the fact that the virus and the vaccine are tools of oppression. If we continue to stay motivated, this is an opportunity to overcome the global elites and actually have something better than before. So I want to thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of the Health Freedom Show. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our email list at myfitlife.net. A link is in the video description. Again, this is Al Morentin, host of the Health Freedom Show. Thank you and have a beautiful day. Peace.